You may now proceed to ask your question.
Thank you very much, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, I have a question for this Cabinet Secretary. Let me, Prime Cabinet, my apologies again. Thank you very much for coming. And you know we respect you a lot. My question is, A, could the Cabinet Secretary state the number of Kenyan refugees in a place called Magado and Dillo towns in Ethiopia, and provide information on the timeline and circumstances of their displacement, as well as current state of their well-being? B, what is the government doing to facilitate the repatriation of the Kenyan refugees, and could the Cabinet Secretary provide a timeline for the same? C, could the Cabinet Secretary outline measures put in place to ensure successful reintegration of repatriated refugees into the local community? And finally, D, will the government compensate the refugees? And if so, could the Cabinet Secretary state whether the compensation will be paid? Thank you very much, Honorable Speaker.
Honorable Prime Cabinet Secretary, you may now proceed to respond, please.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I wish to respond as follows. And I would seek the indulgence because it's a fairly elaborate response so that hopefully I can satisfy the concerns of the member. Part A, that is on the information on the number of Kenyan refugees in Magado and Dillo towns. Let me respond as follows. The Kenyan Borana refugees arrived in Ethiopia in 2005-2006 and settled in the Borana zone of the Oromo region in Dillo and Magado settlements. Their displacement was triggered by a series of inter-ethnic conflicts in Marsabit County, particularly the conflict between Borana and the Gabra ethnic groups over natural resources, grazing lands, contested and disrupted territorial boundaries, and of course local political dynamics. Most of the refugees originate from Marsabit County in the following sub-counties: Saku in Marsabit area, North Horr, Maikona, Dukana, North Horr, and North Horr again, and Moyale sub-county. Upon arrival in Ethiopia, support and protection was initially provided by the Borana clan of Oromo region in 2007. They were registered by the Administration of Refugees and Refugee Affairs, ARA, of Ethiopia and UNHCR. They have continued to live alongside the host community, and ARA is currently known as the Refugees and Returnees Services of Ethiopia. On the number and population statistics, according to the Department of Refugee Services, over 500 families of Kenyan origin living in the Dillo and Magado areas of southern Ethiopia ran away to seek asylum due to inter-ethnic conflicts in North Horr in the year 2000. The conflicts culminated into what came to be known as the Turbi massacre. The breakdown today, as at 3rd as at 3rd of December, it's a statistic, but I'll hand over this also to Parliament. For the Dillo, we have a total of 2,060 in Dillo area, and in Magado, 3,600. In terms of households, these now comprise 1,250 households, 5,671 individuals, male are 2,788, female are 2,883, and children are 3,385 out of the total figure of 5,671. What are the solutions we are looking at? From 27th October to 3rd December, the RSSS and the UNHCR conducted a verification of the Borana refugees in Dillo and Magado refugees settlements. During this period, an intentional survey was carried out to assess the refugees who are willing to return to their home country, Kenya. In terms of households, this amounted to 1,098. In terms of individuals, this was 4,993. Notably, 88% of the total refugee population expressed their intention immediately to return to Kenya. The refugees expressed interest to return to the following areas: 1, Sololo, 1,836, Marsabit, 1,081, Moyale, 633, Oran, 491, Dukana, 325, Moyale Township, 272, North Horr, 206, Maikona, 59, Sangate, Jaldesa, 40, Turbi, 13, and in other areas, 37. Mr. Speaker, the majority of the refugees were not willing to return to their area of origin due to fear of ethnic conflict. They also prefer to move to areas that are inhabited largely by the Borana community. The Kenyan refugees in Ethiopia still retained their identity cards and are now willing to return home to Kenya voluntarily. The second part of the question is about facilitation on the repatriation of the Kenyan refugees, and I wish to respond as follows, Mr. Speaker. The following are possible options. 1, there's organized and facilitated return by the UNHCR. This requires a formal engagement between the governments of Kenya and Ethiopia and is formalized through a tripartite agreement that will include the UNHCR. It will require a rigorous process that entails internal survey to go and see visits, identification of settlement areas, signing of voluntary repatriation forms, and other bureaucratic processes. This option may not be immediate as it requires time in order to fulfill all the requirements. There's also the self-organized or self-return, which is usually spontaneous, and the role of the UNHCR in this option will be limited to provision for information and funding to facilitate the return of the refugees. This option requires the government of Kenya to facilitate receiving and resettlement of repatriated individuals. Third, due to the proximity of the refugees to the Ethiopia-Kenya border, their families in Kenya, including the possibility that they cross over to Kenya to visit their families, UNHCR prefers the self-organized return. For repatriation to take place, the refugees must desire to return, and the Kenya-Ethiopia government should engage in consultations facilitated by the UNHCR Regional Bureau and local UNHCR offices. Currently, as I said, 4,993 individuals have expressed their desire to return back to Kenya, and the process of repatriation should begin. The third aspect was the measures put in place to ensure successful reintegration of the repatriated refugees into the local community. Mr. Speaker, again, this has quite a number of issues which I'll try and run through. They may not be exhaustive, but it's important. There are a number of concerns which need to be addressed that have been expressed and should be addressed before repatriation can take place. These include the following. One, where will the displaced persons return to? How will they be accommodated? That is land, housing, among others. The refugees have been relying on humanitarian assistance to access basic services, and they will need similar support until they are fully integrated. We will have to deal with the issue about their safety and security in the settlement areas. There has to be a proper formal reception organized. We also have to cater for their material safely of the younger generation who are born in Ethiopia. The refugees will require assurance of legal safety, rehabilitation, creation of livelihood opportunities, and in some instances, repossession of property, including ancestral land. We will also have to address intermarriage, births in Ethiopia, and confirmation of documentation for spouses and children. There's also need for mutual recognition of the documentation of issues to the refugees because we are dealing with the other country as well. Finally, the question of whether the government will compensate the refugees. With regards to compensation, Mr. Speaker, the government only facilitates return and reintegration into the Kenyan society for any Kenyan refugee granted asylum by any country. No compensations are paid by the government for any returning Kenyan. What do we consider as the way forward? One, repatriation of refugees should be undertaken for those who are willing to return, as it must be voluntary, based on an informed choice and consent to return given by the refugees to avoid coercion and prosecution. It should also be done with dignity, and we hope this process can commence as soon as possible. Kenya should also ensure returnees are safe, devoid of discrimination, provided with basic services and access to essential services to avoid being exposed to another cycle of displacement. We must also engage and coordinate with the UNHCR, Kenya government and Ethiopia government to facilitate the return of the refugees, including on the required legal formalities, particularly documentation. The send-off from Ethiopia and the reception in Kenya should be done simultaneously. We also have to identification of settlement areas for the returning refugees in coordination with local authorities so as to guarantee safety and security in the resettlement areas. The government will also be looking at how to ensure access to basic foods and services such as health, education, non-food items, shelter, and livelihood opportunities. As I conclude, Mr. Speaker, I wish to reiterate that the ministry remains seized of the situation in the region. A lot has been done, however, much more remains to be done. The ministry appreciates the continuous support of the Senate and further requests that the Senate advocates for more resources to be put at our disposal for comprehensive data acquisition and integration to ensure that we remain seized and fully prepared for the changing dynamics globally. Mr. Speaker, I submit.
Honorable Senator Mohamed Chute, you may now proceed to ask your 2 supplementary questions.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. I really wonder. The Prime Cabinet Secretary is giving us stories. This is a literature the Prime Cabinet is giving us, and it is very unfortunate. What I want to know from the Prime Cabinet, my question number 2 is very clear. The question is, how are you going to ensure the refugees will be returned back to Kenya? They've been there for many, many years. The answers you've given from A to I is a story on what you are going to do. You have not given us timeline. You should have told the people of Marsabit and the people of this country that on this day, we are going to visit Ethiopia. On this day, we are going to sit with the government. On this day, we are going to repatriate, bring these people back to Kenya. On this day, we are going to facilitate them on this and this. But the stories, and really, I really don't understand. The same question I am asking you, you are asking me again the same question, that this is A to I. Please tell us the timeline. Are they going to stay for another 10 years, or they are going to be back in the next 1 year? Question number 2. Honorable Speaker, these people have been in Ethiopia for quite a long time. I want the Cabinet Secretary to tell us, when is the last time people from your office visited those guys in Ethiopia? The last time, if there is even any. Thank you very much, Honorable Speaker.
Prime Cabinet Secretary, you may now proceed to respond to those 2 supplementary questions.
Mr. Speaker, I just wish to, I explained myself that I'll make a fairly broad statement because the issue of the refugees is a very complex matter. And I want to say that consultations and negotiations are going on. And appreciating that when you're dealing with refugees, it has to be voluntary. There can be no forced repatriation. So these discussions are going on between the government of Kenya and the government of Ethiopia and the UNHCR. And this is the reality of the matter. Mr. Speaker, for whatever it is worth, I just want to point out that we would not want Kenyans to be refugees anywhere. And if we had all the resources and all the planning, it would not necessarily take this long for the refugees to be to be repatriated. But remember, you have to do it voluntarily, because any forced repatriation will be contrary to the international law and matters of humanitarian rights. So we cannot force. We have to be, and that is why there's an elaborate process, which I've put in my statement, about preparing documentation and ensuring that the individuals, the households, voluntarily accede to repatriation. The second one is that our Department of Refugees is in touch and is seized with this matter, Mr. Speaker. So I can only say that we will continue working systematically to be able to do that. The final thing is that in Kenya, as an example, we have a similar situation in a place like Dadaab, and we have a similar situation in Kakuma. Handling challenges also as a spillover from other countries. And therefore, it is a big challenge on matters refugees. So I just want to request the Honourable Member and the House to appreciate that this is a process and we have to do it so that we are not in breach of any laws, and to also make sure that the requisite resources are available to facilitate the smooth movement of the Kenyans who are out in Ethiopia.
Prime Cabinet Secretary, if I go to the Honorable Senator for Marsabit correctly, you have indicated in your response that there are 4,993 refugees who are willing to return back. So these ones are not coerced. Already they've expressed their willingness to return home. Is there any program that has been put in place, including timelines when the 4,993 will return home, so that we will deal with the others later, but for the 499,3, is there a program, including timelines when they will be brought back home?
Mr. Speaker, the 4,900 that I've given and disclosed, we have reached this after a very elaborate process that is ongoing of making sure that we are systematic in this process. That's how we've arrived at this figure. So in terms of timelines, Mr. Speaker, that is something that I can seek the indulgence of the House to get further clarification from the Department of Refugees if they can be more specific on the timelines. But I can still maintain that there'll be largely indicative timelines. They may not be those that are firmly cast in stone. They could be indicative.